Hi, welcome back to the Coach and the Geek podcast. My name is Ben Goss, along with Jeff Van Fleet of Lighthouse Technologies and Mark Adams, ESPN analyst. Great to have you both back on the program. This is going to be a really interesting one to follow up with based on what we had discussed last time, because this one is about strategy and culture. Two words that are very easy to throw out there, and we think we know what they mean, but do we really know what they mean? And even beyond that, can we really make them work even when we do know what they mean? So, Mark, let's start with you by asking you a really loaded question to get this episode started. What does it really mean to have a culture of we, and where in the world does that kind of a culture start?
Ben, I love this question because I've thought about it so much over the years as a competitive college basketball coach for 17 years and working hard to build team cultures. I always remember, what my high school coach used to say that, Mark, there's no I in team. And we take that as Bible, right? But the fact of the matter is there is an I in team. And I learned that throughout my coaching career and now as a father and as a husband and working with Jeff with the Coach and the Geek team, that there is an I in team. It's every individual that makes a conscious decision that they want to be part of your team. And so it starts with the one-on-one connection, because you can't be a team of one, but you can be a team of two individuals who align their skill sets, their talents, their thought processes, their mission, and they become a team, and then maybe recruit a third member of the team and a fourth member of the team. And all the teams that I coached over the years, we started off as individuals. But as time went along, because of challenges that we met together, opportunities and a mission that we developed together, we became a true team during that process. And so where does it start? It starts with every individual who believes in you, who believes in your leadership, who believes in our mission. And that's critical for people to know. Just because we put a bunch of people in a room, and maybe they're all software developers who are building the greatest app in the history of the world, like our Focus app, by the way, which does a great job of analyzing hustle stats for college basketball teams and other athletic teams as well. But they're not a team until they decide that that Focus app can change lives. And that's the difference between a tool and having a tool that serves a mission to help people. And so I think that's critical, Ben. And we don't hear enough about how individuals make up teams. Remember, there is an I in team. It's every individual that decides they want to be a part of your mission.
What a great answer. And Jeff, this next question really resonates with me because I can see a number of my students progressing to this level eventually in their careers and having to work their way out of a serious bog based on it. Adding to what Mark just said, what about when you're in mid management and you want to lead a culture change, but maybe for whatever reason you don't quite have the leadership buy in, or really for that matter, the followership buy in? What can you do when you're there in the middle, you know things need to change, and you're stuck on either or both ends?
I think one of the hardest jobs in the world, at least for me in my career, has been as a middle manager. So I've been in my career 35 or so years. Obviously, you start off at the bottom, you begin to work your way up, and before long, and for me, I got a couple of breaks kind of my way, and fairly early, I was 25. I think 25 years old. I was managing a technology office because the former manager resigned, and they picked me to manage it. Now I had to manage these 40-year-olds. My God, how old were 40-year-olds? So I had to manage this group of people, and I had to do performance reviews, and I was just like beside myself trying to figure that out. And that idea of culture as a middle manager is one where if your organization above you has a culture, and a culture that is, let's call it a positive culture versus a negative culture. I think when we talk about culture in general, we mean a positive culture, not a negative culture generally. So if I'm a middle manager, and I was, and in an organization, and I end up in a situation where I think I understand the culture of the corporation. I think when I was thrown into that position, the first, if I were going to talk to myself back then, I would say the first thing I want you to know, Jeff, is what actually is the culture of this company, and how do you want to communicate that and align that with your organization? And so for me, the first thing is, do I really understand the corporate values and the culture above me? And if so, and if it aligns sort of with my personal mission statement and my personal values, then I want to convey that down to my team. I want to reinforce it with our team. uh, i think I think the job is hard. Okay. I don't want anybody to think this is easy. I think culture is hard because it turns into specifics that happen on a daily basis. And you have to understand what those values are so that you can make good decisions along the way that align with that, and that you're reinforcing that with your people. And I think a lesson I learned early, that I still try to today, is celebrate successes with your people in public, but coach the failures in private. And I think that's so critical, that you're not embarrassing your people in public. So that would be my advice in a situation where your alignment, where your culture isn't so bad in your organization.
Great
Mark,
segue
yeah.
to Mark and the coaching culture in terms of praising in public and coaching or reprimanding in private. Mark, did you see a lot of that? And also in terms of being somewhat of a middle manager as a head men's basketball coach, when you feel stuck on both sides, what do you do from there in that particular realm?
First of all, kudos to the geek. I mean, he really gets it about handling those situations privately and when you go public. And when you go public is to give your team all the credit for success. And when you go private is to have those difficult discussions with your players and be vulnerable yourself as to when you made those mistakes and accept responsibility for those mistakes. The thing I liked about Jeff's explanation was when talking about culture, there's really a couple different types of culture. And if you're in a functional culture, I think what Jeff talks about at mid-management level is absolutely dead on. But then what about when you're in a toxic culture? And Ben, to answer your question, as a former coach, I coached at a place, which will remain nameless, that had a toxic culture. Now, some of it was because of the budgetary constraints. And so all the coaches want their own. And coaches are much like middle managers when you think about it, because as a middle manager, everybody below you thinks they can do your job better than you. And everybody above you thinks they can do your job better than you. And so you're sandwiched between those two. And what I found to overcome that was that to understand first that my team is my team. So regardless of what goes on around you in a toxic environment, in a dysfunctional culture, if you will, your job is to protect your team, to embrace your team. You need to shield your team away from those outside influences that can be negative factors, because you can still have a positive culture within a dysfunctional unit. That's a fact. I grew up in an alcoholic family. And so there were parts of my family that were dysfunctional. But my relationship with my big sister, for example, was extremely functional. And the same thing can happen in organizations. And I learned that as a young boy, that I could still control culture to a degree and try to shield out some of those outside influences. So the key is for you to be that firewall, to be willing to take those hits, to fight those battles, but insulate your team against the toxic culture while you're building a positive culture of we within your own team. It's hard to do, as Jeff said, but it's possible. And I would suggest that every mid-level manager look inward as to how they can protect their team, but foster communication, foster positive interaction, foster those public wins to display for everyone, and then those losses that we can bring in and talk about as a family.
Guys, we've heard some really powerful stuff on these episodes so far, but I have to say, of all the things that you've dropped on us, what we have just experienced in the last few moments may be among, if not the absolute most powerful pieces of advice and wisdom that we've heard so far in this season of the Coach and the Geek podcast. And I'm grateful that both of you were able to share and share at such a high level. We appreciate it so much, and we'll see you soon in the next episode of the Coach and the Geek.